Galilee began on Sunday, January 18, AD 28, and continued for about 2 months, ending with the return to Capernaum on March 17. On this tour, Jesus and the 12 apostles, assisted by the former apostles of John, preached the gospel and baptized believers in Rimmon, Jotapata, Ramu, Zebulun, Iran, Yeshala, Chorazin, Medan, Cana, Nain, and Endor. In these cities they tarried and taught, while in many other smaller towns they proclaimed the gospel of the kingdom as they passed through. This was the first time Jesus permitted his associates to preach without restraint. On this tour he cautioned them on only 3 occasions. He admonished them to remain away from Nazareth and to be discreet when passing through Capernaum and Tiberias. It was a source of great satisfaction to the apostles at last to feel themselves into the work of preaching the gospel, ministering to the sick and baptizing believers with great earnestness and joy. 1. Preaching at Rimmon. The small city of Rimmon had once been dedicated to the worship of a Babylonian god of the air, Raman. Many of the earlier Babylonian and later Zoroastrian teachings were still embraced in the beliefs of the Rimmonites. Therefore did Jesus and the 24 devote much of their time to the task of making plain the difference between these older beliefs and the new gospel of the kingdom. Peter here preached one of the great sermons of his early career on Aaron and the golden calf. Although many of the citizens of Rimmon became believers in Jesus' teachings, they made great trouble for their brethren in later years. It is difficult to convert nature worshippers to the full fellowship of the adoration of a spiritual ideal during the short space of a single lifetime. Many of the better of the Babylonian and Persian ideas of light and darkness, good as later adapted by Philo to the Hebrew theology, made Paul's Christian teachings more easy of acceptance by the Western Greeks. It was at Rimmon that Todam first heard the gospel of the kingdom, and he later carried this message into Mesopotamia and far beyond. He was among the first to preach the good news to those who dwelt beyond the Euphrates.
Stuff right here gets into
2. At Jotapata. While the common people of Jotapata heard Jesus and his apostles gladly, and many accepted the gospel of the kingdom, it was the discourse of Jesus to the 24 on the second evening of their sojourn in this small town that distinguishes the Jotapata mission. Nathanael was confused in his mind about the Master's teachings concerning prayer, thanksgiving, and worship, and in response to his question, Jesus spoke at great length in further explanation of his teaching. Summarized in modern phraseology, this discourse may be presented as emphasizing the following points. 1. The conscious and also personal communion between the earth child and his heavenly Father. 2. That prayer, which is inconsistent with the known and established laws of God, is an abomination to the paradise deities. If man will not listen to the gods as they speak to their creation in the laws of spirit, mind, and matter, the very act of such deliberate and conscious disdain by the creature turns the ears of spirit personalities away from hearing the personal petitions of such lawless and disobedient mortals. Jesus quoted to his apostles from the prophet Zechariah, "But they refused to hearken, and pulled away the shoulder, and stopped their ears that they should not hear. Yes, they made their hearts adamant like a stone, lest they should hear my law and the words which I sent by my Spirit through the prophets. Therefore did the results of their evil thinking come as a great wrath upon their guilty heads.
Yep.
And so it came to pass that they cried for mercy, but there was no ear open. He who turns away his ear from hearing the divine law, even his prayer shall be an abomination." 3. By opening the human end of the channel of the God-man communication, mortals make immediately available the ever-flowing stream of divine ministry to the creatures of the world. When man hears God's Spirit speak within the human heart, inherent in such an experience is the fact that God simultaneously hears that man's prayer. Even the forgiveness of sin operates in this same unerring fashion. The Father in heaven has forgiven you even before you have thought to ask him. But such forgiveness is not available in your personal religious experience until such a time as you forgive your fellow men. God's forgiveness, in fact, is not conditioned upon your forgiving your fellows, but in experience it is exactly so conditioned of the realms of time and space. Even the infinite love of God cannot force the salvation of eternal survival upon any mortal creature who does not choose to survive. Mercy has great latitude of bestowal, but after all, there are mandates of justice, which even love combined with mercy cannot effectively abrogate. Again, Jesus quoted from the Hebrew Scriptures. I have called, and you refuse to hear. I stretched out my hand, but no man regarded. You have set at naught all my counsel, and you have rejected my reproof. And because of this rebellious attitude, it becomes inevitable that you shall call upon me and fail to receive an answer. Having rejected the way of life, you may seek me diligently in your times of suffering, but you will not find me. 5. They who would receive mercy must show mercy. Judge not, that you be not judged. 7. The cry of the righteous is the faith act of the child of God, which opens the door of the Father's storehouse of goodness, truth, and mercy. And these good gifts have long been in waiting for the Son's approach and personal appropriation. Prayer does not change the divine attitude toward man, but it does change man's attitude toward the changeless Father. The motive of the prayer gives it right of way to the divine ear, not the social, economic, or outward religious status of the one who prays. 8. Prayer may not be employed to avoid the delays of time or to transcend the handicaps of space. Prayer is not designed as a technique for aggrandizing self or for gaining unfair advantage over one's fellows. A thoroughly selfish soul cannot pray in the true sense of the word. Said Jesus, let your supreme delight be in the character of God, and I will present your petition in accordance with your real needs and desires and in accordance with my Father's will. Guard against the great danger of becoming self-centered in your prayers. Avoid praying much for yourself. Pray more for the spiritual progress of your brethren.
Yes.
Avoid materialistic praying.
Yes.
Pray in the Spirit and for the abundance of the gifts of the Spirit.
Yes.
10. When you pray for the sick and afflicted, do not expect that your petitions will take the place of loving and intelligent ministry to the necessities of these afflicted ones. Pray for the welfare of your families, friends, and fellows, but especially pray for those who curse you, and make loving petitions for those who persecute you. But when to pray, I will not say. Only the Spirit that dwells within you may move you to the utterance of those petitions which are expressive of your inner relationship with the Father of spirits. Prayers. Prayers of thanksgiving are appropriate for groups of worshipers, but the prayer of the soul is a personal matter. There is but one form of prayer which is appropriate for all God's children, and that is, nevertheless, your will be done. 12. All believers in this gospel should pray sincerely for the extension of the kingdom of heaven. Of all the prayers of the Hebrew Scriptures, he commented most approvingly on the petition of the psalmist. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Purge me from secret sins, and keep back your servant from presumptuous transgression. Jesus commented at great length on the relation of prayer to careless and offending speech, quoting, Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth. Keep the door of my lips. The human tongue, said Jesus, is a member which few men can tame, but the Spirit within, inspiring minister of mercy. 13. Jesus taught that the prayer for divine guidance over the pathway of earthly life was next in importance to the petition for a knowledge of the Father's will. In reality, this means a prayer for divine wisdom. Jesus never taught that human knowledge and special skill could be gained by prayer. But he did teach that prayer is a factor in the enlargement of one's capacity to receive the presence of the divine Spirit. When Jesus taught his associates to pray in the Spirit and in truth, he explained that he referred to praying sincerely and in accordance with one's enlightenment, to praying wholeheartedly and intelligently, earnestly and steadfastly. 14. Jesus warned his followers against thinking that their prayers would be rendered more efficacious by ornate repetitions, eloquent phraseology, fasting, penance, or means of leading up through thanksgiving to true worship. Jesus deplored that so little of the spirit of thanksgiving was to be found in the prayers and worship of his followers. He quoted from the scriptures on this occasion, saying, "It is a good thing to give thanks to the Lord, and to sing praises to the name of the Most High, to acknowledge his loving kindness every morning, and his faithfulness every night. For God has made me glad through his work. In everything I will give thanks, according to the will of God." 15. And then Jesus said, "Be not constantly over-anxious about your common needs. Be not apprehensive concerning the problems of your earthly existence. But in all these things, by prayer and supplication, with the spirit of sincere thanksgiving, let your needs be spread out before your Father who is in heaven." Then he quoted from the scriptures, activity to afford the indwelling Spirit the better opportunity to speak to the listening soul. The Spirit of the Father speaks best to man when the human mind is in an attitude of true worship. We worship God by the aid of the Father's indwelling Spirit and by the illumination of the human mind through the ministry of truth. Worship, taught Jesus, makes one increasingly like the being who is worship. Worship is a transforming experience whereby the finite gradually approaches and ultimately attains the presence of the infinite. And many other truths did Jesus tell his apostles about man's communion with God, but not many of them could fully encompass his teaching.
What's up, Maurice?
3. The stop at Ramah. At Ramah, Jesus had the memorable discussion with the aged Greek philosopher who taught that science and philosophy were sufficient realities which the mind alone could never discover or fully fathom. Intellectual strivings may reveal the facts of life, but the gospel of the kingdom unfolds the truths of being. You have discussed the material shadows of truth. Will you now listen while I tell you about the eternal and spiritual realities which cast these transient time shadows of the material facts of mortal existence? For more than an hour, Jesus taught this Greek the saving truths of the gospel of the kingdom. The old philosopher was susceptible to the master's mode of approach, and being sincerely honest of heart, he quickly believed this gospel of salvation. The apostles were a bit disconcerted by the open manner of Jesus' assent to many of the Greeks' propositions. But Jesus afterward privately said to them, "My children, marvel not that I was tolerant of the Greeks' philosophy. True and genuine inward certainty does not in the least fear outward analysis. Never forget that intolerance is the mask covering up the entertainment of secret doubts as to the trueness of one's belief. No man is at any time disturbed by his neighbor's attitude when he has perfect confidence in the truth of that which he wholeheartedly believes. Courage is the confidence of thoroughgoing honesty about those things which one professes to believe. Sincere men are unafraid of the critical examination of their true convictions and noble ideas." On the second evening at Ramah, Thomas asked Jesus this question: Master, how can a new believer in your teaching really know, really be certain about the truth of this gospel of the kingdom? And Jesus said to Thomas, your assurance that you have entered into the kingdom family of the Father, and that you will eternally survive with the children of the kingdom, is wholly a matter of personal experience, faith in the word of truth. Spiritual assurance is the truth, and is otherwise equal to your intelligent understanding of truth realities, plus your spiritual faith and minus your honest doubts. The Son is naturally endowed with the life of the Father. Having been endowed with the living Spirit of the Father, you are therefore sons of God. You survive your life in the material world of the flesh because you are identified with the Father's living Spirit, the gift of eternal life. Many, indeed, had this life before I came forth from the Father, and many more have received this Spirit because they believed my word. But I declare that when I return to the Father, he will send his Spirit into the hearts of all men. While you cannot observe the divine Spirit at work in your minds, there is a practical method of discovering the degree to which you have yielded the control of your soul powers to the teaching and guidance of this indwelling Spirit of the Heavenly Father. And that his teachings had been confused and uncertain regarding the survival of the righteous. And it was refreshing and inspiring for Jesus' followers to hear these very definite and positive words of assurance about the eternal survival of all true believers. The apostles continued to preach and baptize believers while they kept up the practice of visiting from house to house, comforting the downcast, and ministering to the sick and afflicted. The apostolic organization was expanded in that each of Jesus' apostles now had one of John's as an associate. Abner was the associate of Andrew, and this plan prevailed until they went down to Jerusalem for the next Passover. The special instruction given by Jesus during their stay at Zebulun had chiefly to do with further discussions of the mutual obligations of the kingdom and embraced teaching designed to make clear the differences between personal religious experience and the amities of social religious obligations. This was one of the few times the Master ever discussed the social aspects of religion. In the smaller cities of Galilee and Judea, there was a synagogue, and during the earlier times of Jesus' ministry, it was his custom to speak in these synagogues on the Sabbath day. Sometimes he would speak at the morning service, and Peter or one of the other apostles would preach at the afternoon hour. Jesus and the apostles would also often teach and preach at the weekday evening assemblies at the synagogue. Although the religious leaders at Jerusalem became increasingly antagonistic toward Jesus, they exercised no direct control over the synagogues outside of that city. It was not until later in Jesus' public ministry that they were able to create such a widespread sentiment against him as to bring about the almost universal closing of the synagogues to his teaching. At this time, all the synagogues of Galilee and Judea were open to him. Iran was the site of extensive mineral mines for those days, and since Jesus had never shared the life of the miner, he spent most of his time, while sojourning at Iran, in the mines. While the apostles visited the homes and preached in the public place, the fame of Jesus as a healer had spread even to this remote village, and many sick and afflicted sought help at his hands, and many were greatly benefited by his healing ministry. But in none of these cases did the Master perform a so-called miracle of healing, save in that of the leper. Late on the afternoon of the third day at Iran, as Jesus was returning from the mines, he chanced to pass through a narrow side street on his way to his lodging place. As he drew near the squalid hovel of a certain leprous man, the afflicted one, having heard of his fame as a healer, made bold to accost him as he passed his door, saying as he knelt before him, Lord, if only you would, you could make me clean. I have heard the message of your teachers, and I would enter the kingdom if I could be made clean. And the leper spoke in this way because among the Jews, lepers were forbidden even to attend the synagogue or otherwise engage in public worship. This man really believed that he could not be received into the coming kingdom unless he could find a cure. This man did not do as Jesus had instructed him. Instead, he began to publish abroad throughout the town that Jesus had cured his leprosy. And since he was known to all the village, the people could plainly see that he had been cleansed of his disease. He did not go to the priests as Jesus had admonished him. As a result of his spreading abroad the news that Jesus had healed him, the master was so thronged by the sick that he was forced to rise early the next day and leave the village. Although Jesus did not again enter the town, he remained 2 days in the outskirts near the mines, continuing to instruct the believing miners further regarding the gospel of the kingdom. This cleansing of the leper was the first so-called miracle which Jesus had intentionally and deliberately performed up to this time. And this was a case of real leprosy. From Iran they went to Gishala, spending 2 days proclaiming the gospel, and then departed for Chorazin, where they spent almost a week preaching the good news. But they were unable to win many believers' rejection of his message. The sojourn at Chorazin was very depressing to most of the apostles, and Andrew and Abner had much difficulty in upholding the courage of their associates. And so, passing quietly through Capernaum, they went on to the village of Nain, where they fared little better. There prevailed in the minds of most of the apostles the idea that their failure to meet with success in these towns so recently visited was due to Jesus' insistence that they refrain, in their teaching and preaching, from referring to him as a healer. How they wished he would cleanse another leper, or in some other manner so manifest his power as to attract the attention of the people. But the master was unmoved by their earnest urging. 5. Back in Cana. The apostolic party was greatly cheered when Jesus announced, "Tomorrow we go to Cana." They knew they would have a sympathetic hearing at Cana, for Jesus was well known there. They were doing well with their work of bringing people into the kingdom when on the 3rd day there arrived in Cana. While the apostles stood by in breathless expectancy, Jesus, looking at the father of the sick boy, said, "How long shall I bear with you? The power of God is in your midst, but except you see signs and behold wonders, you refuse to believe." But the nobleman pleaded with Jesus, saying, "My Lord, I do believe, but come ere my child perishes, for when I left him, he was even then at the point of death." And when Jesus had bowed his head a moment in silent meditation, he suddenly spoke, "Return to your home, your son will live." Titus believed the word of Jesus and hastened back to Capernaum. And as he was returning, his servants came out to meet him, saying, "Rejoice, for your son is improved. He lives." Then Titus inquired of them at what hour the boy began to mend. And when the servants answered, "Yesterday, about the 7th hour, the fever left him," the father recalled that it was about that hour when Jesus had said, "Your son will live." Saw that the whole countryside was aroused, he said, "Let us go to Nain." 6. Nain and the widow's